So yeah, last year, one of the key questions we were continuously asked in the data mesh learning community was about how do I get buy-in? So we decided to reach out to community members who had started their data mesh journey to understand what worked for them and what didn't. Data mesh learning ran a survey to ask people who had been there and done that to share their insights, which resulted in our white paper called Getting Data Mesh Buy-in, available on our website, as I mentioned today. So today we have Amy Raygada, who will be moderating our discussion, and we have Antonio Murgia and Austin Kranz. So yeah, take it away, Amy.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, my name is Amy Raygada. I'm a Senior Data Integration Program Lead at BEBA RE. I'm MVP of the Data Mesh Community Learning, and I'm super excited today to moderate this panel about how to get buy-in for data mesh. Today, we will get key insights from two of our writers of this paper, and we go more in depth about what information they compiled during this process of writing it. I would like to introduce to you our two panel experts, Austin Kranz, Director of Data Strategy at Atlan, and Antonio Murgia, Data Architect at Agile Labs. So guys, could you please introduce yourself? Antonio, let's start with you.
Yeah, you probably said most of it. I'm a data architect at Agile Lab. I had the pleasure to work on multiple data mesh initiatives at different stages. Sometimes it was actually getting buy-in and getting some kind of prototype and ways to make the executive buy on the data mesh idea. And sometimes was actually implementing a self-service platform, which is, well, a kind of different role. And as you said, I'm part of Agile Labs. So we are an Italy-based consulting firm. We specialize in large-scale data management. So both in terms of organizational, which is what data mesh focuses on, and also data volume sometimes, because we also like engineering problems too.
Thank you, Antonio. Austin?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Austin Kranz, Amy, as you mentioned, Director of Data Strategy here at Atlan. Atlan's an active metadata platform, data catalog. I help a lot of our key customers on kind of their broader strategic initiatives, whether that be data mesh or just building out data governance programs. I spent the past 5 years or so at Gartner doing very similar things with hundreds of data teams across the industry, building out governance structures, figuring out how to create data products quickly, but in a governed way. So balancing control and agility. It's a lot of the themes I work with our current customers about as well. So glad to be here. Happy to talk data mesh.
Thank you. Well, as most of the people probably that are here today know, that data mesh is about to fix problems such as scalability, decentralization, the agility of data teams, to get more simplicity, get a quality boost on the data we're using, to foster collaboration between the teams, and of course, having governance and flexibility. All these brought by a data platform, that all put all these together, and also with the centralized domain governance, right, the federated governance. We know there is no one right way to really implement the data mesh, and it really depends on each organization. From your point of view, what organization is data mesh most beneficial for, and why? This is for Antonio, because you have seen probably a lot. Well, actually, both of you, right?
Yeah, so first of all, you need to start by a problem, by a need, right? So you don't implement a data mesh because it's cool to implement a data mesh, because it's really hard work. It's something that needs to be planned strategically for years. It will take years before your data mesh initiative pays back, right? So first of all, it works on large enterprises and with many business units that are diverging in some way, either technological or not, and they need to go back and collaborate to take mainly data-driven decisions, but can be anything, let's say, data-driven. And so definitely is something for organizations, for large enterprises. They need to be big, otherwise it won't be worth it. On the other hand, you need to find companies that are from the organizational point of view ready. So they want also kind of to give up some centralized roles and positions and like transform them to make data mesh work. So definitely doesn't work for small or medium-sized companies. They don't have the need, so it's probably not worth to invest in a data mesh initiative. Or highly centralized enterprises or organizations that actually it's not in their DNA, and they do not want to have a decentralized organization. That's it. Because if you don't buy on the decentralized part of data mesh, it's probably not worth the investment.
Thank you. Austin, what are your thoughts on this? Do you differ from what Antonio said? Do you have other perspective?
I think I agree with the first part that Antonio was mentioning, where large enterprise strategic size customers, I think it sort of becomes a necessity to adopt a more strategic approach to how you're developing data products, to, I would say, federate some of the responsibilities to the domains. Because if you think in a large enterprise, one domain could be the size of an entire mid-sized company, right? And so there's enough complexity there to rationalize a new approach. I do think data mesh is still applicable to any organization that's using data. I would say what you should look for in terms of criteria, like, again, as Antonio mentioned, is the problem statements. I think there's a few common symptoms that arise that organizations can kind of look at and say, yeah, we might need a new approach. And I think we'll talk about this later about, do you have to go full scale end-to-end data mesh? But I think if you're finding you have a centralized data team that is just getting inundated with requests and the backlog is growing endlessly, and fulfilling those requests become a bottleneck, I think that's a symptom to look for, to probably start to investigate how can we, in a governed way, federate some of this responsibility to individual domains, whether that's the organization's growing in size or just data needs are growing in complexity. So that you may find yourself a bit overly centralized. I think the opposite happens a lot in small to mid-sized companies too, which is they're too federated, right? Everyone's buying their own BI tool. Data is very ad hoc, probably a lot of shadow IT that's happening. And that might be an area where something like more centralized governance, federated governance, automation could be helpful for those types of organizations. So I think I don't know if I'd start from like, is there a size company that it's right for? It's more of what symptoms are you experiencing? And I think that's how I would kind of start to approach data mesh.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I actually had a mentoring call with one startup one day, right? And they were like, we want data mesh. And I'm like, what's the size of your team? And they were, well, we just gonna hire one data engineer, and we don't have a data platform. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is not for you, but my recommendation will be to start getting the best data governance best practices. So just have a data glossary. It doesn't matter if you don't have the budget now, but at least keep it on an Excel file. Then you can do some import out of it, or use the data as a product principles. You might not have data mesh as such, but as your startup scales, then you will be able to scale with it as well. And the mindset will be there already since the very beginning, to having data ownership and this kind of things. Because people hear data mesh and it's like a keyword, and it's like a buzzword, right? And they want it. They say, I need it. And for media size, as you said, it's could be very siloed as well. And sometimes the need to kind of unification with a data platform, it's kind of a good to go as well. In this survey that you basically, all this information that you compiled there, we see that large part of budgets are dedicated to talent versus technology investments. So basically, a lot of people is hiring contractors or consultants to do this data mesh implementation. So why do you think is so crucial to hiring these externals for a successful data mesh implementations over the technology? And where does tech fit in? Austin?
Yeah, I think it's one of the encouraging statistics, right? That because in my mind, it's saying technology is a last step, and usually that's a pitfall, right? People want to start with let's just buy the tools, let's just buy a bunch of technology, and hopefully it solves it. You can't buy data mesh. I think having the right skill sets becomes important because if you want to decentralize and have more domain responsibility, well, you can't just make the assumption that they have the talent to be self-sufficient in an individual domain. And so you may need to augment your talent pool. You may need to hire some contractors to get things moving. On the flip side, like if you're breaking down the pillars, I just talked about decentralized domain ownership. Well, building a self-service platform is an entirely new task in and of itself. You already have an existing operating model for data and analytics. And now if you're pursuing data mesh, you're essentially saying, well, there's this whole new group of development tasks that need to happen to support and build a self-service platform. So I think it makes sense that there are probably more people and process investments that need to happen prior to technology. And I think once you do that groundwork, you'll have a better idea of what tools can come in and help, or what tools you need to support that level of scale. So.
Thank you. What are your thoughts, Antonio?
Well, I do agree with what Austin said. I would also add that contractors can also help with an objective perspective. Usually, big enterprises are filled with politics and people that want their domain to become bigger or their role to be more important. And hiring contractors to kind of try to fit the data mesh approach into your current organization and to find the best balance between the two, because it's going to be a journey for sure. You won't start with a perfect data mesh decentralized organization on day one. You need to move from the old organization to the new one. Having contractors that can spend time to understand what you have and then give you an objective perspective is also probably one of the reasons why you hire contractors for this kind of job. And also, well, people that already implemented a data mesh or a self-service platform or federated governance and any more technical pillar can help, obviously, because internally, if you're just starting out, you won't have any kind of expertise. On the other side, I feel that, yeah, if you already have a data platform, the technical part of it should not change too much. Like it would be an error if you say, I'm gonna take yesterday data platform and data technology and throw it out of the window. So the tech data stack that most companies have is already fine. It's more a matter of automating manual processing or processes, sorry, or making governance automated or as much as computational as possible. And actually, if you throw yesterday data platform out of the window and start new, you will have a bigger wall to climb in order to get the data mesh going, right? Because you will need to start again and build a new data platform with data mesh in mind, changing tech stack for the whole company with regard to data, obviously, and that's gonna hit very, very hard. So I found more beneficial when we integrated the data mesh into the existing data platform, and not the other way around, where we were pushing completely new tools to implement data mesh, because you're putting an higher wall to climb to your first data products, let's say.
Yeah, I think from my perspective here and experience, I have seen many companies that build up first a data platform, right? And they have this shiny data platform with everything you need for data mesh. But since data mesh is a socio-technical, approach, not really, like a tech-centric approach, most of the companies might fail if they don't hire someone also to, kind of give them workshops or guide the people to understand that they need also to work on the cultural side of things and not only focus on the technology, right? Of course, if you have the technology, it's nice, but I think that's the last thing that people might need to focus on, and more in how you're going to bring this mindset change to the organizations. And that's the hardest part, I will say.
What we're saying is that I wouldn't actually, if you already have a data platform, you don't need to build a new one. Well,
exactly.
If that doesn't fit into data mesh and you need to throw it out of the window, well, just do it. But honestly, I found more beneficial to change the processes around it and automate those processes more than building a new one.
I think
Exactly.
if I could just, sorry to derail
Sure,
the
no worries,
conversation, but I think I completely agree. Like most customers we work with are already on the quote unquote modern data stack, right? I mean, from a tools perspective, you have everything that you'll probably need. I have seen more trends around. So we work a lot with data governance teams. I have seen data governance teams hiring an engineer, which is interesting because there already is a team of data engineers, right? But there's a team of analysts, and they're building the business critical data assets. But to go from like the asset to product, there actually is a new persona that's building maybe like optimizations on top of those processes. So the actual engineering team that builds the day-to-day is somewhat separate from some of these teams that are just doing analytics on top of the data estate, doing almost more like meta data analytics or engineering metadata pipelines more purposefully. So it's an interesting role I'm starting to see. There's almost like an internal data optimization team that is being spun up. So
yes, that's true. And that's actually brings us to our next question, which is from the report that you had, guys, 60% of the reported people encountered that no resistance with their organizations regarding buy-in for data mesh initiatives was happening. But when they run the culture or organizational resistance as they got started, it was quite high. So what do you think will be effective way to educate internal stakeholders to avoid these resistance to change? Maybe you have seen a lot with the data catalog part, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of shifts happening in we obviously are focused a lot on the data governance world, so maybe that pillar is highly applicable to us, but this whole like reactive to proactive types of governance, it involves a lot of changing the way that you already do things. I think if you're getting buy-in initially, so there, I think it was 67% said they had buy-in, but then encountered cultural change when they're implementing. I don't necessarily think that's surprising. If you're trying to improve your data maturity, I think generally leadership, if you can phrase data mesh as a way to improve data maturity and get to data-driven decisions, leadership tends to align with something like that. When you go to implement, now it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. Business leaders don't necessarily care about anything data mesh. Saying federated computational governance to a business leader goes in one ear and out the other, right? I think you have to really do a lot of due diligence up front to understand what the business challenges are, So you can come to them and basically empathize with their challenge and say, I do have a way to solve this. And you sort of have to get comfortable as a data person. You may never say the words data mesh, right? To a business leader. You know, it doesn't mean anything. And so you kind of can just say, through better data and analytics, or, you know, we're going to improve the way we do data and analytics at our organization, and it will help your problems that we've just identified. I think that's the way to kind of ease any kind of cultural tension that you may have, because at the end of the day, it kind of seems like everyone's on the same team. You know, we're all just trying to solve these problems. This is just one way we're going to try to do that. So I think that's the big thing, is you have to start speaking in business value, and not necessarily, you have to leave the technical world a little bit when you actually get to implementation. So
Yeah, do you have some examples maybe from your experiences and how you can frame these related to business value?
So I think there's one example that I see a lot at different customers in the governance world. Like, governance is very similar of a term to data mesh, right? A lot of our teams stopped saying governance completely. You know, for us, it's a double-edged sword, right? We sort of have to say it because that's what people looking for our platform are looking for. But then when they go to implement it, oftentimes it just becomes data enablement, or you know, it's something more around teaching and learning than it is, hey, here's another process you now have to deal with or implement. And so I think just approaching it from more of an enablement standpoint is something that I've seen work pretty well. So
Thank you. Antonio?
Yeah, I would say that you need to sell the business value, as Austin said. So you need data literacy from the people that are buying in. They again, you need to start from the problem. If they understand that data that sits in other domains and other parts of the organization is helpful for them, for their business, then they're probably buying in data mesh. But otherwise, if they don't see the value of this, it's pointless. There's nothing you have to sell to them. And well, you need to start with data literacy, definitely, and then come up with examples and cases in the past where, well, we could have done that if we had access to that kind of data, and the access was easier, or the data was more curated, or if there was anyone accountable for exposing high quality data to us so that we could do that thing. And maybe that's a way to avoid the resistance. And yeah, it starts with education. Otherwise, if you try to sell something they don't need, they won't buy it, obviously.
Yeah, I agree with both of you actually, and for me it's quite interesting because I have done this already quite some times in different companies. And for example, in the new company that I'm working right now, the first thing that I did was to speak to stakeholders from marketing, a strategy team, from communications, and some other teams, and they were actually really thirsty to get data and start working with them. But when my team goes and talk about data enablement platform, for them it's like, how do I do it? How do I use it, right? And then what I do basically, because I do a lot of data governance, I just go and sit with them and have a coffee and listen to their problems, like a psychologist, you know? So I'm always like, hey, and what's going on with you and this and that? And for example, I just found out that the marketing team wanted to hire a vendor to do some recommendation system and some AI. But we have a data team, or we have a data platform team that will be able to help them, but it's a large company of 5,000 people, right? So these kind of things is where we need to start, you know, communicating more, talking more, and as you both said, it's more about showing the cases, teaming up, you know, with the right people, resolving a problem, and they will actually advocate for you. And that happened to me in my previous company, right? Like I was with the monetization team. They had pretty bad data. They were complaining about the data team all the time. I sat with them. We put some rules on top saying like, okay, if you want more data quality, please provide us with the business logic, some test cases, and we can work together. We implemented that. We improved the data quality quite a lot. They were super happy because we also harmonize metrics. They don't have to look in a lot of systems for one metric like revenue, for example, or leads. And then other teams, because we were very siloed in different verticals, the other teams from monetization came to me like, hey, I want what they have, right? How can I get that? And I'm like, okay, now I can come to this data team and sliding a little bit because there is resistance also from different data teams, different data stacks. And I think just being kind of a psychologist or a preacher helps quite a lot. So I totally agree with you guys that the business value is what really get this buy-in.
Yeah.
Cool. But now talking more above in the chain, how would you get buy-in from C-level, director level people? What would you do to get this to happen? Antonio?
Well, the first thing when you talk with the C-level is probably to quantify a return of investment, which is quite hard, but you need to come up with some numbers and some metrics you want to observe in your data mesh. And also, well, you need to prepare them for the long run, unfortunately, but I see it's beneficial to make it clear from the beginning, like you won't see results in 6 months, for sure. You need probably at least 1 year, probably more, to get that platform effect and the network effect that you have in the data mesh. I've also seen, well, getting the sponsorship and getting the buy-in of one really influential person, and a person that has budget and can move budget, and so able to use both the carrot and the stick. So I will try to educate you all, and I really want this to work in a good way. But if that doesn't work, well, I will force you to do this kind of things. So that is not nice, let's say, but works. We've seen it works.
Thank you, Antonio. Austin?
Yeah, I think understanding where you're at from a data and analytics maturity standpoint can be very helpful in terms of how you approach the conversation. I think some organizations already have budgets. And if you're already willing to spend tens of millions of dollars on cloud data warehouses and technology, and you already have a significant budget that is going to increase year over year, the conversation is probably more to your previous question. It's more about getting buy-in from the business teams to follow a new approach than it is necessarily getting that top down. I think if you are pitching, a drastically different budget and approach, and this is foreign to the organization, I think starting with, hey, here is our current data maturity, and here is how this new approach could help us improve. And if you have to just land where that current executive understands there's value. Like if they're already ready to invest in data and analytics, it might just be more about communicating what data mesh is. It might be more of an educational type session. Whereas if it's, we're really just trying to get our data maturity off the ground, and you're sort of pitching data and analytics as a strategic asset in general, that's a completely different conversation. I think you now need to lean back towards like traditional business metrics, increase revenue, decrease costs, reduce risk. And I think a lot of times you can also lean into whatever the mission of your particular company is. If you're in banking, risk is probably much more important than might be more important than cost reduction necessarily. And so pitching data mesh as a way to reduce risk in a increasingly complex environment is a great way to understand buy-in. If you're in a CPG type company, well, reducing increasing revenue through multiple channels might be the top business objective for the year. Well, lean into that and say that, well, this is sort of how data mesh will help us achieve that business goal. I think that is like the path of least resistance to get that type of buy-in from the top down. I think industry is definitely important there as well. Industry and maturity, kind of the two factors you need to look at. I just talked to a customer yesterday who showed a great presentation of the data mesh pillars, but they described it as, okay, think of data mesh as just we need a really well-organized library. Like, how do you build a well-organized library? Well, you have librarians, you have all the books that are very clearly labeled, you can find them very easily. You know, it was just a very digestible analogy for anyone. And I think they took it a step further, and instead of going into what are the four pillars, they kind of just had very simple names, and they did their own rating. They said, we're probably a 1 out of 5 when it comes to, I don't remember the actual ones, but like we're a 1 out of 5 when it comes to data products, but self-service platform, we're actually doing pretty well. We're probably a 2.5 out of 5 in this area. And they sort of put the baseline out there and said, if we work on this over the next year, here's probably where we can get to achieve that kind of goal. So they blended the maturity assessment with the data mesh pillars. And I think that helped them make a lot of progress.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, do you have maybe some examples of successful data mesh POCs to give people ideas on what could be a good starting point?
Data mesh POCs are always much more narrow than pitching data mesh, right? Like I think, Amy, in your example, you went to marketing and you found that they were trying to do some type of predictive analytics. Like finding a use case is probably how you're going to get the quickest win. I would definitely suggest building. You can strategize from the top down, but you have to implement from the bottom up, really, when it comes to data mesh. And that's how you're going to go through and find use cases that are most important to the business. Like I think, Amy, you and I have had conversations in the past, right, where it's, you know, you interview data leaders and you ask them about data mesh, and you know there might be an assumption that, oh, they're going to talk about data products or data domains, and I think so consistently the first best practice that they recommend is just getting really good at stakeholder interviews. Like becoming that psychologist is way more important than however you're going to build the solution, because if the solution is aligned with their problem, they're not going to care how the solution was. So yeah, I just think finding a handful of use cases and really getting results so you can go to that next line of business, that next domain, and say, here's exactly what we did. And you kind of avoid the data mesh conversation altogether. You don't need to explain too detailed how you did it. It's just, here's how we got results. And I think that's how you can get more buy-in. So
Thank you. Antonio, do you have maybe some examples from you?
We've seen that it works best having these POCs on brand new initiatives. So things that do not have too much legacy, also in the, let's say, analytics and data plane of the companies. So initiatives that sometimes are even mandatory, like ESG, so environment, social, and governance. You get budget to run the POC. You don't have too much craft from the past because it's brand new. Probably the company never looked into that kind of data. Really helps to make the POC shine. And well, one thing that excites domain the most is to have a self-service platform. So when you show them that you are able to go from, let's say, 0 to something that is useful for them without opening tickets to an IT department that should provision some components on the cloud, really makes the ball rolling and well, excites most domains that then want to have that new shiny things that is the self-service platform.
Yeah, actually, sorry, it was quite interesting for me to gain like the C-level buy-in we team up with two of them, and I have heard this a lot from a CDO. I think it's from Ericsson. I don't remember. I heard her, and I took this as a cool advice. And it was about your best friends are going to be the CFO and the CPO and the COO. Sorry, because they have data like HR and data like finance, and they really don't know how to handle this. So if you find something that will attach to this and also to some money savings or maybe efficiency in processes, this might be your way in to be able to come top down, but also, it's part of the bottom up, as Austin mentioned as well, and as you mentioned, Antonio. So for example, we did some cost reductions in the cloud by using our self-service platform and also automating, with some machine learning models to scan and have, for example, deletion policy, put the projects, in order, the house in order, get some cost reductions, and we saved 200,000 euros in 1 year. And we went to the CFO and showed him that, and he was, okay, I want more of this. Let me open now my financial data. He was always refusing to do that because I would like to see what else we can explore there. And that's how you start also buying, right? Or another example was with the COO, and HR had some metrics done by an intern every month about hiring, all these hiring metrics. And she was basically typing from one system to an Excel sheet all the time, prone to errors, calculations maybe not in the best way. And then we brought this data, via API directly to the cloud and had a nice, dashboard in Looker at that time. So they were so happy that they were, okay, we also have this ESG report that we would like to have, or then we have the employee data we would like to put maybe in the cloud and anonymize and do these kind of things. So if you, as all of you mentioned, finding these right low-hanging fruits, right, are the ones that might allow you to start creating different domains, different data products without calling in data products as such, so they don't get scared, because that scares usually the people. Also the word data mesh, as Austin mentioned at some point. Also, I would like to ask you, have you find in any of the companies you had worked with some kind of return of investment out of these small use cases or POCs that you can share maybe as an example?
Well,
Yeah.
as I said, you probably start seeing them after a year or so. But we had one international bank as our customer that has observed both a reduction in costs, as you were saying. So having this, let's say, computational governance and rules applied automatically to, for example, data retention or stuff like that, or compute resources being up and running without any reason. Having this automated governance can help kill those costs. And also in the time to market, because you after a while you can find your data right away. You don't have to run to go to some IT department and ask to pull another data set that maybe was pulled for someone else 1 month before, because you need it in your own platform. Like those are the things that can actually reduce a lot the time to market. But having numbers is quite hard, also because sometimes you end up comparing apples to oranges. Like data projects are usually very heterogeneous. You cannot say, well, the complexity of these is similar to the complexity of these other projects. You know it when you finished it, probably when it's done, but not before starting. But it was more like a feeling of that customer that he wanted to, let's say, share with us. So I think they really think they are getting faster at delivering data projects.
Thank you, Antonio. Austin?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. Well, I'll share one. So one of our customers, they're essentially a holding investment company for different biotech companies. And across their portfolio, they were able to build a data product that actually became something that they could monetize. So essentially by being able to pull together from all the different companies, they were able to now package this, make it accessible via an API, and each of these companies now had a new such a revenue stream that they could tap into because it was a like aggregate benchmark data across all of the companies. So that's an example of a net new data product being something that they were able to spin up relatively quickly. It was something that they had done on an ad hoc basis for every single one at various points of time. And I think just by using their new architecture and using using Atlan behind the scenes to kind of expose the data to the different portfolio companies. But that's an example, I think, of a net new revenue stream. We have a lot of examples of just efficiency benefits. Like, one of our customers was able to take kind of an ad hoc project that had been built and left for some period of time. It was a dashboard that was generating a query to their Snowflake instance, I think like hundreds of times a day. And like one dashboard was costing them something like $12,000 a month just on the usage. And by productizing a bit more, essentially what all they did was optimize this to create like a cache data product that refreshed on the cadence that consumer needed. And they took that from $12,000 a day to just one query refresh that lived in a BI tool. And people could self-serve all they needed on top of that. And so that's a like incremental cost savings. It was like 12 times 12, $12,000 a month over the course of a year. I think it's a good way to show ROI. People like to see hard numbers. And so even though there's probably a lot of intangible or more qualitative benefits to that they could sell, I think it's good to have some type of hard number as well. So
yeah, I think that's about it, right? To try to find how you can save money, not like a lot every month, but summing up is going to be quite a lot. Even, for example, metrics such I don't know, maybe a data analyst, if you take the time they used to clean a data set, bring it to life, be able to use it to put something on a dashboard. It could be, I don't know, 2-3 weeks to say something, but then when you have a data product with good quality, monitored, they can go self-serve and immediately put it, in your visualization tool. And even if you go further, you create metrics like an Atlan, and you have already those metrics there, model, you can just plug and play. And that reduces a lot of time and efficiency for the business, right? Those are the things that you would like to show. Yeah. The one more question for all of you guys. Do you need to advance on all 4 data mesh pillars at once, or can you do this just one at a time? What are your thoughts on this?
Want me to go?
Yeah, go.
Sure. I would say the pillars are somewhat intertwined. I think there's some that you can focus on if you're just getting started, because I think they'll lend themselves to the others. Meaning data products as a term, I think is something we've seen a lot of our customers really focus on. Just the data as a product mindset really resonates. And in doing so, to build the most effective data products, you might want to like automate different governance workflows more. You may want domains to own data products. And so I don't think it's necessarily, do you have to do all 4? I think in focusing on one, you'll probably touch on parts of the other. I would say your goal shouldn't necessarily be to progress in each individual pillar. And I think it's good to maybe evaluate once a quarter or something like that, but it's going to be more about the use cases that you can compile in terms of how much value they're adding. So focusing on data products seems to be something that we see customers really latch onto. They like the idea of domain ownership. There's a lot of challenges with that because a centralized team can't just say we want people to take responsibility of the data. I think that's a recipe for, failure without a plan behind it. But the data product piece makes sense. Like, how can we make sure things are discoverable? How can we make sure there's clear ownership? How can we make sure they're described very well? Like, we want the products to be interoperable and used by other domains. Like, that's a good starting point, I think, get the ball rolling in data mesh. And then the other pillars will start to sort of support that as well. So that's just what I've seen. So.
Thank you, Antonio.
Well, my point of view is a bit different because, yeah, I agree on the fact that all the pillars are intertwined. So you need to keep all of them in mind, but probably you want to start with a self-service platform. Obviously, the platform is not something like, okay, I'll buy Databricks and that's my platform. No, the platform should be something that allows you to code and automate and steer the governance of the mesh. So you need a tool that is able to enforce rules and to speed up development. Because if you start only with the standards, let's say, written on paper, like the process to do this is that, and you should do it, well, you can't really tell if you really have a data mesh or it's just a mess. Everyone is still doing the things the same way. You have a lot of shadow IT because you don't have any way to actually control it, to have a measure of anything. While if you start with the automations in a platform, you are able to keep things well, either under control or at least monitor it.
Yeah, I'm actually torn between the two of you, right? Because I believe that you can go little by little, building up on the pillars. But also, I think that the data platform is quite important. So from my perspective and my experience, if you get just one use case, and you implement end-to-end, then you can scale it slowly, because you already will have the platform, the kind of the best practices, and then you can scale it up maybe slower, on each of the pillars. But to begin with, maybe that will make sense. I mean, from my own perspective. Just to finalize before taking some questions, any advice on getting started with data mesh and getting buy-in very quickly so we can take the questions? And Austin?
Yeah, I think just become a very good listener of the different domains. If you find that you're not quite sure where to start, I would say you need to do a bit more research from your own business's problems, because people are hungry. Like, there's always going to be a use case that some domain has been trying to achieve for a long time that you could easily come in and say, that's something we could support. Like, Amy, your example is great. So I think really try to understand and empathize with business problems, and be prepared to be the data mesh expert, but not try to create, you don't need to make everyone a data mesh expert. You just need to communicate how it could solve problems in your organization. So
thank you, Austin. Antonio?
I think it's very important to, before getting buy-in or getting started, to visualize how you want your workflow to be with regard to data. So this means you need to talk with people that are writing policies or processes inside your company, and understand if those policies are compatible and those processes are compatible with what you're trying to build. Because there are even environments when you cannot get a self-service data platform because you have some papers to be signed in order to access data, or you need something to go through a ticketing system in order to get access to something. And if these processes cannot change and cannot be automated, probably you're going to get stuck. So try to understand what is going to be the workflow for all the different personas that are going to work inside the mesh and understand if they can actually be implemented, if it is what they want, for sure, because you should build the stuff that people are happy to use and that help them in their day by day. That helps a lot. We've seen, like, we went through an implementation and then at some point we couldn't automate deployment of data products. Like the policy was deployment has to be done in such a way that you cannot automate it, and well, you're stuck. You did almost everything or most of the stuff. You've done shift left of governance, for example, but then you cannot actually get the DevOps cycle and the data product quantum deployed automatically. So you lose a lot of speed again.
Thank you, Antonio. So let's take some questions for the public now. This one is for Austin. Changing organization or even changing mindset is commonly perceived as a monster. How do you recommend starting small? What do you perceive as highest value and low-hanging fruits? From Robin.
Yeah, I think this comes back to the like what are you hearing from the business? I've even seen organizations create like a value versus viability kind of matrix of all the use cases that they collect. In other words, is there something that we could implement in the next few weeks or month versus something that might be really beneficial, but it's going to take us 6 months? I think if you can get an inventory of all these use cases, you'll be able to get that quick win a lot faster. And that is the low-hanging fruit. Like if there's a pain point that is very clear to a domain or a line of business, I think that's how you kind of start with cultural change within one use case and then go to the next use case. And I would say be comfortable not saying no, but choosing the right ones. Like you don't have to choose the biggest, craziest project that is going to take a very long time. I don't think that's going to generate much value. So
thank you. And we have another question from JGP, if you're still here. So this is going to be for Antonio. What do you think of people saying tools can do data mesh like Google Dataplex? And what arguments do you tell the purchaser?
I want to say that it's kind of true that tools can do data mesh in the sense that you can probably use most tools to build a data mesh. The thing is, tools come and go, and their lifespan is not that long anymore in the tech industry. So when you're going to build a data mesh or a data platform in general, you want to build into the data platform or the data mesh your company processes around data, which shouldn't be tied to a particular technology, because if you tie them to a particular technology, then you are locked in and you're not able to evolve in 5 years when that thing is not going to be cutting edge technology anymore. So you need to start with your processes and see the tools that fit best in your way to work with data, and then integrate them in your data platform. It's not possible, in my opinion, at the scale that data mesh makes sense, to just buy one thing and stay within their walled garden. If you are a smaller company, I think that might work, right? So you say, okay, I don't want to complicate things. I don't want to do integration work. Okay, I'll be on Google forever, and let's buy Dataplex and make our way of working with data fit into that framework. But for large enterprises, it should be the other way around, in my opinion. So again, tools, many tools are very keen to data mesh right now. They are evolving to be like that. They probably cover a lot of aspects of it, but not not all of them. And also, I think that it's not a smart move to become locked in with a vendor or a tool, because again, you want your data platform to outlive you, because the processes around data shouldn't change.
Yeah. Thank you, Antonio. Sorry to cut you off, but I need to get a few more questions. Then I would like to ask one more to Austin. We have completed a POC, but it seems that success is not being acknowledged, seen, probably shadowed by the business executive strategy to centralize the data. What are your thoughts on that and how this can be, swift or shift to a different way?
So I'm just reading it again. Completed PC, same success. I'm not sure. I don't know. I probably need more context on that. I think there's a piece here that seems like centralization is a challenge. I would say centralization isn't a problem. I talked to a lot of organizations going through data mesh journeys, and I've heard the phrase "we're centralizing to decentralize" a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. So if you're going through a POC, and it's not being acknowledged as successful, I would probably reevaluate what your metrics for success were in the first place. I wouldn't necessarily put like decentralization as a goal or centralization as a goal. It's all dependent on your organization. As long as you're not 100% one or the other. If you find yourself decentralized, you'll probably have to do some amount of like centralized governance practices. Maybe a centralized team creates the best practices. Decentralized teams are free to operate how they need to, as long as they comply with the centralized best practice, right? I just don't think you want to become a bottleneck. Bottleneck is very different than having a high degree of centralization. So yeah, POC success rates, I don't know, maybe reevaluate what the success metrics were to begin with, and also understand if you connected with business value. If your success metric was we did data mesh really well, I would take a step back and say like, well, what's the next step? What were you able to accomplish by delivering a data mesh use case?
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for attending this panel. Thank you to Antonio, to Austin, Paul, and Diagonis from the Data Mesh Learning community. We hope to see you in the next events, and I hope you have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. Thanks, Antonio. Thanks, Austin. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you. Thank you for all of your insights. That's like really helpful, I think, to a lot of people. Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you all on Tuesday at our next talk at 9:30 Pacific time. Or 9, yeah, that's right, 9:30 Pacific. All right.